Okay, so we're gonna break down this board. We had this on now for 2 weeks, and it was just a breakdown to really share about what Omnu L or Emmanuel is the frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the gist of what we were trying to break down and then share with people as a potential of an ingathering. But what is this word that we have called Emmanuel? That it's not Omnu. And then it's separated in its occurrences with the L factor, which is the mighty, the God, the pillar, the ram, right? As the measure of really a priest, as one measure, as taught, as really one that is contained as capacity of what light would be as a frequency, one measure, right? And kind of summarizing God in limited perspective, of course. But so we're looking for this expression of validation, which would be the omnu, which would then fulfill to invalidate what God is as more of a 0 point perspective of a vortex of how to build in right turning to restore this connection that is beyond our earthly realm. That's the God factor. It's like life, omnu, death, the L. That's everything beyond in the ether. We're building the container as housing, as a dwelling for the potential of L's beyond infilling, which would be more ruach or of a spirit essence, ether, that we've already shaped its intention. It's now well fortified, and now the resolve would be the indwelling of the spirit again.
Right. So like rucha huba,
right.
The spirit, which is love.
Right. So yeah. And
right.
So we were sharing here that, and we'll break this down, but we're just going to flow. We're just going to see what this goes as a flow without controlling it to say we need to go in step. So when you say even the language of ruka, of spirit, to know that this language of essence, of learning how to know what love is, has to be navigated through compassion's measures. This is more of the waterline of a mere refraction that's saying the origin is like a photocopy that completely inverts it. Like this is a waterline, which is why we have womb, because we're brought into this. We're brought into the waterline. There's like a mountain above. Sorry, I'm erasing here.
Yes, you are.
All right. So it's like a mountain above that's reflecting on a lake, and its reflection is the exact mirror. So it completely inverts it, right? So this waterline of photocopy is the same language of the womb language. That why the inversion is to be brought into this photocopy, we have to go through the water's womb, right? Which is the same word for rakam, which is measures of compassion. This is our sole responsibility to fill ourselves up again so we can become the origin or the original again, which is love.
So if you were looking at this, then birthing would be coming through the mem.
Birthing is through the mem.
The open mem.
The first mem.
Right. So this would be, because it also is chaos.
Yes.
And then
chaos and innocence.
Chaos and innocence, right? And we've talked about that with the suckling babe. But then moving into the right side up portion would then be the completed mem.
Right.
Which would be mighty.
Right. Right. The two mems together are the completed is what we're going to get to, because we have to know the way to stand up water again. And this is the word for memakun.
Right. So just dot connecting here. The mems in what we just said is the Paleo Hebrew meaning of that symbol itself.
Right. That's
so just for people who don't know that.
Yeah. And so there's a lot into this that, yes. And you can write down here. Can I erase this? So
as long as I can.
So write down mem
over here. There we go.
So write down mem noon vav.
Mem noon vav.
Okay, so that's memnu or memenu. It's actually it's memenu. There's actually it's a carry on. And so now we have the two mems, and now we have the new. These are two words. There's the fullness of the mem, and there's the new, right? And this is the word for who. This roots down to me, like Michael.
Oh yeah. So this is the root of it is mem hey.
Yes.
So
Ma.
really, you're to say ma, which is also a measurement, but it means chaos reveals.
Chaos reveals. So
Chaos is going to reveal the mighty.
but this is more of an expression of who it is
Right.
as a resolve. This is more of the potential. This is what you
So
have to do.
this is part of another word for a query, like who and what and how and why.
Right. And this is
and the what.
And we know this would be the prefix to Michael. Machia,
which is also the root for manna.
Right.
What is it?
Right. So who is like God
Right.
is a progression of what is this thing that we're to become. So these mams, and because the reason I want to put this memanu in here is because that nu is on the suffix of Emanuel, omnu. So we need to define what this process is.
So right here.
So that's the spelling. I know that we're jumping into something we've already established. So this is going to be in its own right a vortex. And so we're going to try to gently present it, but I already can see that this is going to make a lot of people dizzy.
It's okay.
Because we haven't calibrated. So we're into father's advanced, mother's revealing, and this is lofty because of what it connects the right hand and the left hand as one completed being again. And we have to know this word for what memakun is as a potentiality. And so, but this word for compassion by breaking this waterline, because all like right now, we are somewhere in between either we've turned this nature or we're in some form, because this is still a micro of the compass, right? This is just more of a schematic that's going into the center. And now as soon as we've touched the board, now we've diminished full potential by giving expression of what is this resolve of who, right? And this water line is teaching us that love is an expression of many encounters of compassion that have to be gathered. Compassion means put together passion.
So, and another way that you could say that, so connecting for people who have seen our teachings would be rakam.
Right. Which means it's a word for compassion and love.
Loving kindness.
And also matrix and womb.
Yes.
So
and heat.
Right. So, but that's justifying again what it is as the water's way of the mirror to say you're birthed in now spiritually and matter of factly.
Right.
So this is going on. We are speaking two dimensions here of us coming in from above, from our higher position of being into our becoming by being brought in from ether or spirit body into now material form. And we have to
into the matrix.
Into the matrix. And now we have to be rendered down to be birthed into it in a whole other dimension.
So the whole point of the matrix in the birthing process through loving compassion is to raise us up, Reshmu.
Right.
To raise us up, because I said noon. Reshmem, to elevate room through life.
Right. Everything in here is the process of life. This is death.
Yep.
We've come in from death, which is just beyond in its innocent form. And now our whole journey in life is to experience life. Really, the whole process is to render clear death.
Exactly.
That's the whole process of where we are innocently.
So validation, invalidation.
Right. So we've been separated in this. This is totality as a whole being, as an essence. And I have this on there as only a demonstration, but this is no shadow and turning.
Right.
In its higher extent. So I'll erase that so it doesn't confuse people.
Although that still is like the negative pole, not as in being evil. That's just the feminine energy. Right.
It is the black mass that is rendered clear as one result. But really, when this is done correctly, that is actually equated as full presence of light. Mm-hmm. There is no shadow in that turning.
Right.
Right. Because they've now resolved it.
Right.
This down here is the result. And we were talking about this a little bit yesterday about people trying to equate this as their own resolve. And that we had some questions based on misappropriation or mishandling to the point where, it became even abusive situations, rape, incestual, acts, violation of youth. right?
Trespass,
Trespass, right? It's
bringing harm upon another,
right.
encroaching upon another.
So the difficulty of returning. Now, if we had parents that returned to this nature, and they were in the world now performing the responsibility as God in the earth, as now putting it together what this is, and they were now our guardians and our caretakers, as it should have always been, then we would have been, and actually the earth would have been a representation of sacred again, and God would have been walking on the earth in form.
Right. So it is up to us and our responsibility to reparent ourselves so that we can do that for the next generation.
Right. And so in saying that, though, this is, again, the echoing of what people say, like I'm working through, most people say we're working through the shadows. Yes, when we're birthed into it, as soon as we're birthed into it, we're already, because it's inverted, we're already established as chaos, full-blown chaos. But again, innocently, we're not saying that, it simply is, again, you fell from grace into disgrace, and it just means you now have to find your way back. And this is like, say this is like a vial, and it's, or a tube, right? And it's filled with clear water and murky water. Our job is to journey and then clear it, right? But we have a parental or a mother-father component in this. And I know parent is a word that it can be bastardized by breaking down its language of its parent, but I'm not concerned about that. When you understand the language, we're the creators of all language and all frequency, so it gives way to the greater.
Well, they're technically creators because mother and father created the child, created the son or daughter.
Right.
So
but if our parents haven't cleared this tube correctly to write this, to produce this origin in the earth, then we as children brought into this spiritually have to go through their left hand. This is the oppression that, and I know.
Well, of course, because they would be raising us in that measure through their shadow, because they didn't neutralize it.
They didn't neutralize it.
So all they could do is duplicate themselves in their children based upon where they were at in that moment of rearing.
Right. And we know that up in this measure here, if I was to carry this through, if this was the black, that we know that this nature represents the full-blown ego or vanity, right? That's what it is. It's ego and vanity on that side. The right side renders that void or invalid, this validates to invalidate, and now we have neutrality within.
So in just so that people can connect to this is us as a being, as the temple. This is coming in just so that people know what the schematic is. Because they're like, what is this?
Right. This
is a person, this is a man or a woman that came in, that was born upside down.
Yes.
As a 6.
Yes.
As quote unquote sinful man, which just means missing the mark. That's all it means. It just means missing the mark.
Yeah.
And the mark is moving the energy up to a 9 to be the completed as a spiritual sovereign that is not under the water line of the oppression, but is now standing above, over it.
Yeah, water line is
under God, as God.
Yes. The water line is everything below in this as above, so below, that we're to fortify ourselves, to seal ourselves up so we know what it is to dimensionally move. This is the full representation of actually Solomon's temple. This would be Yakin, this would be Boaz, and then the inner sanctum. But in its right measure, the holies, and then the Holy of Holies. And then there's another one above that will go dimensionally as the sacred chamber. Like this is like the 13th. Like if there's the journey of 369, that's about as much as we can get here to equate the 12 kind of per se. And the 12 is the resonance, 1 and 2 would be the 3.
So then that, if you were putting that on the tree of life, that would be above the Keter, which would be the Ein Sof, which is the light that doesn't exist.
Right.
Transparent light.
Right. So let's bring this, transparent light. You move,
so beyond
you
the
move,
parenting and into light.
Yeah,
into the stage of the Ein,
you're
becoming nothing, completely invalidated.
Yes, you are now into the stage that you are now origin, and fulfilling the purpose of the photocopy as a template. So this place, and this is what we were sharing before about this measure of shalom, is very important, because Solomon, writing the book of Song of Songs, that the Shulamite and Solomon, the same writer speaking to himself, he was just writing in poetry expressing peace is a measure, and I have to draw my own self out as a bride to wed myself as one again to fulfill the temple's order. That's the man.
Right. So that the masculine and feminine energies are no longer separated.
Right. So he has
going from the bet back to the aleph.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we saw the fickle of the woman, right. So, but this is exactly what this is. But
the woman is the shadow.
The woman is the shadow. So let's go back down to the birthing that we came into this now, that because we are spirit, but now we are brought into the place under a direction or a tutelage or a pointing of what is above us, which would be more of the parent or the mother and father component. And this is where we get into the fractals from, because as the child, we are completely aware of this, but not aware of this because we already rendered it neutral. We came in more neutral than not. We're completely innocent. We are centered, right? And we're not comprehending what ego even is at that point, because we just came from here. We just came as one entity.
Right.
And now we're in this stage. And it doesn't take very long to realize how your parents navigate that. They're now bringing you up through what they have or have not rendered in their own ego or vanity. And we know that most parents are not this. We know that now perfect, yes, to be perfect. But in this, what we're having to do now is be brought up, and we're bumping against ego and vanity. And this is our teacher. Until we come to the age of, well, it's actually interesting that we'll talk about 18 in a little bit. Maybe it will be another teaching, but until we can move beyond the age of accountability, we are still under this mucky water that they haven't had the ability to clear yet, to resolve that nature. And that's
so in a lot of ways, if you were to connect that to the compass, right? So we come in at 0 point, literally clean slate. And if our parents are still in the West, because they haven't transmuted any of that shadow.
Yeah, then the West would equate as completely like this.
Right.
It'd be like they're still at nothing.
So they're pulling us
right
into the West.
Yes.
But we don't go past that unless they teach us to how to move.
Unless we're free of their charge.
Right.
And we're able to navigate on our own to bring this measure, because
they're technically the wards.
They're the wards.
Or AKA wardens.
Right.
Ward Dan.
Right.
The wards that are judged.
This is where the world is so confused, is because they should be representing God.
Right.
This is where we have improper power in place, because it's ego-based and it's vanity constructed.
Right.
They filled up vanity, but not in the right. Vanity is to return back as filling it up, but in the measure that clears it by validating it correctly in innocence, we then invalidate what vanity is.
Well, it's just really interesting because vanity means to be empty.
Right.
Right. But technically, they're not necessarily empty because they're full of shadow.
Right.
You have to empty out your shadow,
right,
which is where you're dealing with vanity.
They're empty in capacity.
Right.
They don't have the ability to know what is beyond, because they are completely void. They're void of the ability for capacity. It's an oxymoron.
So depending on how much shadow is there is going to determine how much capacity they have to bring the light.
Right. So let's just say a fortunate few children, right, are brought into this measure of parenting.
Yeah.
Right.
How amazing.
How amazing would that? Now, hopefully it would all be gone, but we have to journey as a child. And this is where the language of immaturity comes from. We are now being weaned and ripened into the representation of what our parents are modeling.
So in other words, something that we have talked about is children being able to be on our shoulders. Meaning we lift them up as far as we can based upon this.
Right.
So that they can go even higher.
Right. So here's
So being the shepherds from behind or underneath to lift them up.
Right. Yes. And so now we know this measure, we know the language of anyone that follows our teachings, they know the power of what it is to be an adversarial friend. It lives in the same space, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is really in perfect, that's an adversarial friend in totality when it's resolved, because it holds itself accountable by equaling the measure of response. I'm as much an adversary as a friend, and I vibrate that at light speed and I make myself a response. Right.
Like that.
Okay.
So you can see
That's 0 point.
Right.
So we have to dart over into the left hand really quick to give an expression why the adversary looks like Satan in the earth as a serpent, and why we deemed it as something wicked. The reason it's wicked is because it's never been resolved in the earth.
So having said that, I want to bring that in, because the Ein Vav Lamed does mean wicked,
right,
or evil.
Right.
And in its transliteration, like if you were to speak this as Ein Vav Lamed, it would sound like Evel.
Evel. Right.
But it's also the same for a suckling babe.
Right. So this is the child. Now again, so
one last thing on here, because it has the Vav in the middle being the transmutable sign, it literally is a representation of our spiritual side and our material side that are connected.
Right.
Without the distortion.
Right.
So as a suckling babe, you have the transmutable sign already in here.
Right.
Until the parents start bringing us into their West shadow teachings.
Right.
Like the poor blind naked, because they have no idea.
Yeah. People have to go into
because they're raising us in ignorance, because they just are doing what was parented to them.
Right. That's exactly. But
Yeah.
in its innocence, really, this is just in your knowing you should expand by your teachings. It's really
Right.
It's an innocent word, just because we're all suckling babes at one point.
So then those teachings are what gives you purpose.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it fulfills.
And so if somebody is wicked, technically they never move past being a suckling babe. They're still a child.
Well, that's the point of what evil is and
Right.
why it's become.
Right.
So we need to
because of all that shadow.
So we need to now to unearth this, because even our pulpits teach this, and most of our pulpits are somewhere in this equation too. They haven't rendered it clear. All they know is like, this evil is bad. It's Satan. But really, because they haven't rendered it clear. Just hold on one second.
I was just going to say, this is duality here.
Of course it is. Yes.
Well, just connecting. So if the pulpits are determining things are good and evil, then really they haven't even quite transmuted the shadow.
No, and good and evil is only, it just means we're brought in this same measure filled up is ill. That's all it means. This is ill, sickly, maleficent. This is well, good, benevolent. That's all. That's well and good. That's what it means. It means your sickly is not whole. Well is whole. That's what it means. Ill means not whole. That's all it means.
So if you are divided,
you've been brought in unwell.
Right.
Ill. What does that mean? You're divided. You're going to have to wrestle the resolve of masculine and feminine within you, and it's going to look like good and evil, and it's going to be a wrestle. And it will. Now we're in the product of its formed. Now it's taking on a form of an entity in the world, and it's called evil because we filled it up, and now it's taking on a form of identity by form. There's many serpents in the world that are in wrong standing. Because in innocence, now we need to journey into the left-hand side, because this came into the world first. Whoever came in and formed first was in this full-blown right off the get-go.
Well, sure, because I totally see that, because the world was formless and void.
Right.
Tohu bohu.
Tohu bohu.
So in formless and void, it was vanity.
Right.
Right. And then formless, it was actually all the feminine energy.
Without form.
Exactly.
And so until it took form, it had to then go through the memory swipe of going like, wait a minute, I no longer am able to really calibrate what I was out of form because I'm in form right now.
So this is why we became form here.
Form here to experience that which we already are. But we have to go through the expression of knowing the expanse of evil.
So consciousness, formless and void, came in.
Yes.
And so in order to create, it had to manifest flesh in order to create something that is of matter.
Right. Right.
That's so amazing.
So,
And of course, then as the Elohim created as light and dark, right here, this is when that happened.
so really you could say that as soon as a child is born, oh my goodness, evil's in the world.
Exactly. The suckling babes
In
that need to know and see the purpose
right.
of that which is within them, that is supposed to teach them.
The trouble is, again, going back to this, that we have incorrect role models that are teaching us what evil is not.
Right.
They haven't collapsed it to render it down, to say, wait a minute, let's reframe this. I have much as a parent or as a guardian, as a warden, I have responsibility now to caretake you, to take you back to right standing.
But I have to do it with me first.
But I have to do it with me first,
yeah.
Right? Because in this measure of wherever we are in this, we are now establishing the left is already here. If we're still upside down, every full power is here. It's gone. You have the power. You just need to turn it so you have the authority too.
So when it hasn't been transmuted correctly, this becomes force. So
undefined force.
Well,
uncontrolled force, undisciplined force.
So for example, in my personal situation, having a biological dad that was very heavy-handed with me, he brought in force to try to control me. But in actuality, it was because of his own shadow that it was causing him to be forceful with me to get me to submit.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I know. I'm just saying, I mean, a real life scenario.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm trying to get to, is that I'm drawing you now as being a child. You did this to a point where your dad was right there and you were bumping up on his ego and his vanity, and he had no way, no capacity to see beyond that. And so until you became of age of your own standing to be free of this is what we're all oppressed by, a representation of inadequate or partial representation of a mother father.
So then what ends up happening is that shadow element that is still part of him based upon what, just my specific example, bringing force caused this to happen to me. All my pain, all my suffering, all my trauma, all the abuse, all the shame, all the guilt. Now my shadow is completely filled. Yes. So I already started with a measure of what he had. Yes. And then because of the force being put upon me, because he hadn't transmuted it, now I'm completely full, or you could say I'm empty. It actually
causes you. It actually causes you to regress. You actually go down a little further. This is what's happened.
So the measure, interesting. So the measure that was not transmuted by my dad just got put down on the bottom.
This is how we this is how we break free of the intention of return and create another hole. This is another lockdown down here. We could draw another dimension.
Wow. Yes. Because that is the fullest of the dark side, full-blown ego that has not been transmuted, because the transmutable part is right here where heart is.
This is the opportunity to fulfill.
Right. Now, so this is transmutable, right, but the section that's below, because they can.
Well, they can, but it's very difficult to move to another dimension because that was never really what was imposed upon us.
So in other words, you have a compounding effect of the shadow. If you're here and you choose not to transmute it through that VOV, then, and you go in the opposite declination, now you just took this and made it twice.
Take the evilest person in the world that says, I'm not going to go into any righteous standing of order of ethics or honor, and I choose to oppress because I know what I know and I choose not to. And if they are anywhere near anything of nurturing, which they impossible, they're innate, right? They have no capacity, then the only thing that they can do is produce an inversion upon an inversion, a photocopy of a photocopy. You now have to go through one version of yourself. This is where we get DID. Mm-hmm. you now have another entity imposed upon your responsibility, and you have to now, and this will go down, 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 until the many photocopies are rendered clear, till at least we can see the origins template of Yod-He, Vav-He. This is the vision of intention. This is the fulfillment of intention as revealed. It's already there. This is the template above the waterline, below the water. This is always the innocence. I didn't want to get into the dark shadow of this because.
But it's important.
But it is important.
You know, for me, having gone through DID, there's many others that may not even recognize that they have it. And, you know, and technically humanity, all of us do.
Right.
Because the ego.
Right.
Is a separated self.
It's a very difficult job. This alone is a task. This alone is an amazing feat. But
well, and here what is something that when you were talking about the water line and then you're drawing this inversion down below and keep going, how much pressure is put on someone when they keep going down?
Mm-hmm.
This is grace. The pressure that's coming down is that the more grace is required, the more pressure that is felt, the farther down you go. Yeah.
Well, the sad part is in here is that this is a vortex. This is made to, like, this is actually doing this, right? This is the whole process of expansion, contraction. We were brought into the womb of contraction to produce birthing's purpose, to return to expansion. Right. That's what it's doing. It's doing that. The unfortunate thing is this vortex down below here, they're getting now the force of contraction upon them is actually pushing them down. That's the danger. And condensing them into a space of nothing but the inverted nothingness. This is how we have the world as we're this antimatter. Right. We've actually, the oxymoron, we've actually made unsustainable sustainable. That until it becomes, now we're at critical mass where it's going like, no, they're done. I'm now bringing everything back so we can see this to restore the measure. This only has to be done. Yeah. So what we're doing is we're breaking the yoke of the shadow. Yes. Because this photocopy after photocopy after photocopy, when we get to the place where it is no longer sustainable, which is where we're at. Right. Then you get a generation of people that break free from that. Yes. Because they end up transmuting all of that. So why the question? Yes, absolutely. So let's go back to this. This is why reparenting ourselves is so critical. It's so important. But so let's go back to the template of vision to the fulfillment of its intention. Okay, let's go. So this is the water line again. So let's just focus on this without going into the inversion upon. Oh, we already did. Okay. We don't need to. I think we established that well. So this question mark is here because this is where we have the language of what we've again called Namaste, or the language of the headless horseman. Why we bow our head in reverence. Really what it is. Because you don't have one. When you're brought into this, anyone that bows their head is realizing that, oh my God, I'm waiting for my head to be placed again because I was birthed into this system that only humility will put this back on to the meek position. So this whole process is really about producing a humble walk. The humble walk. And when we bow to people, what it is recognizing the God in them on their own sojourn. Right. I see you in return. Right. And I know that I was born in like you, that the head was automatically taken off my shoulders, which means I no longer have dominion and power because I willingly surrendered it, my sovereignty. So I go through the experience of finding it again. And that is why even connecting with what I shared recently with the book of Revelation, verse 3, has the word gur in it, about a sojourner. And that whole explanation is honoring each other's journey. Right. No matter what it looks like, we are to honor another because of the potentiality that is within each one of us. Right. The light. So here's a reparative. Yes, absolutely. So now, the potential's there. So there you go. So there's one now that's done this. Like, well, I see the light in you, wherever it is on your journey, where it doesn't really matter. Hopefully we've fulfilled it. And if we've done, then now we're moving into really God in earth language, because now you flip the whole nature. And you put the right on the right and the left is on the left. But before we do that, I need to cross-reference back over to say, if this was fully darkened in the earth, why? Why is this so oppressive? Because really what this left is by definition, we'll go into some language here. But this is the language of Shamal. It means the god of the cloaking. It means that someone is wearing the dark cloak of the judge magistrate without the authority to do it.
You might want to put the cap on it. It might be drying out.
So that's completely black again now, but that's what the left-hand side means is the full blackened coat that's supposed to go over top of the white. So this left, if we can jump, because now if we're talking about Solomon's temple, which is Shalom or Shalama, this is the temple of peace. Peace means complete, peace means full, peace means perfected. It's the residence of fire and water sharing this same space and is connected with light, right? Shin, Lamed, Mem, right? The conjunction of that has taught you how to know what is this
water and fire.
And it's in you.
Right.
The point is that Emanuel is in you. This power is in you. There's a lot in this. There's a lot moving right now as we're sharing this. But I have to jump over to the left to say, well, why? Because this is the language of Boaz, which means the mighty and the swift, but it's directly connected. There's Boaz, right? So it says that it's stating that either built or build through establishing through your power of knowing and seeing, and you're going to have to do it through really sowing and reaping, or through a process of lesser to the process of greater.
Well, it's cutting off, plowing the fallow soil,
right,
and cutting off that which doesn't serve you, but it's also a letter that means to feed and nourish yourself.
Right. But most people don't realize that if this is established right away without the due diligence of that level of response, it's a question. Can you build this? It's not saying.
And then it's saying, can you build it? But it's saying it's going to be built on the inside.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Through the twin powers.
It can only be revealed from within you. There's nothing on the expression of an outward manifestation of this. Everything is within us to create the spirit, right? So the capacity is there for the spirit to indwell again.
And then that way we can affect the external.
So it's more or less a question.
Causing an effect.
So it's more or less a question. Can you build this? What am I building? The template above. Can you turn this? Right? You just need to know how to return to the standard measurement and not be a copy of it. You need to go back to the origin. This is law language. And you're going to have to do it through knowing and seeing, through the experiences of expression, because now you're into the place of feelings and emotions and sensories, right? I've separated you from the spirit. There is a spirit around you, but you don't get it in full totality. It comes in distillation. It comes in drips and drops.
You got to find it.
You got to find it to compress it because it's in your blood. And this is the life journey that shows you what the spirit is as a measure of completed death. It's what infills you with death. It's your back to form. So this left hand of Boaz is very intriguing because the left-hand pillar being Boaz, it means the mighty and the swift, but it ties into so much more and I don't want to go into the fullness of it, but it's the expression of deed as a title, because Shalem as the whole title, it's interesting that Salma or Salama is Boaz's father, which is the same frequency, Shin Lamed Mem He, and or Aleph.
Shin Lamed Mem He, right?
Which actually there's another spelling of Aleph, and it says, I am now fulfilled peace. I am the name of light, and I'm the father of Boaz, and I am peace. And so this, if we
do you want to?
I'm going to get there. That Nashon, which is serpent, is the father of Boaz. So we have the serpent.
So this is the grandfather, this is the father, and this is the son.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is. So the serpent is the father of Boaz's father. There's the 3 generations right there. And so if we do our job correctly, we inherit the portion of our inheritance is directly connected to the lineage of line. So this in this negative was saying that they're saying, I'm the mighty and the swift deed. I haven't learned how to stand because I haven't even learned how to crawl, for goodness sakes, but I'm already sitting in the position of authority, wrapped in the magisterial cloak of the mighty and the swift deed of peace and in the serpent's role. That's why the world's gone away. Now, when this authority creates an inversion, now we have an inversion, a bastardization of the serpent.
So then what happens, the way I see it, is that there was a vacuum created because Adam was supposed to have both of these. And because humanity or mankind, when came in, because Adam means mankind. So when Adam came in because of this inversion, it left this place open.
It left it.
It was like a vacuum that was drawing, that was needing to be fulfilled by Adam being rightly trained up.
Can you pause it? I need to get my plug in. There you go. There you go. All right, go ahead. Was it on?
Yeah. So
Okay, so Adam was the serpent. When he came in fully manifested as being equal, he already qualified as rendered clear as total. So he would have been this as the template of progeny. He came in the representation of already Adamah as one blood.
okay, so are we talking about an individual here, or are we just talking about mankind?
I'm talking about as a representation that brought in the template already came in a form that was not in form. Something came in as Adamah, as a frequency that said, I'm here in totality and I'm not in form. I'm here to make a space. So you're going to have the opportunity. But as soon as you go into form, this has to be rendered, because as soon as you come into form, you're going to be split. Birth. Through division, through multiplication, or through embryonic measure, you're going to be split right away. There's already dynamics within you from atom, from the measure. So the measure of Adam came in, like you're saying, as a template of resolve, totally clear. Came in as a measure of resolve. Adam and Hava, life and death, came into the earth as one completed measure. And then they were separated.
So life was taken out.
Life was taken out.
The mother
yes.
of all living, the feminine component, which is this.
Right.
The feminine component was taken out of mankind, and that's why we ended up becoming dominant patriarchy.
Right.
That was always keeping us from this. That's why it created the vacuum.
That's why.
And so this had to be filled with something, because the way this reality works, there has to be balance between the two energies. So if we keep everything right in this dominant form of trying to build form all the time without filling it, something has to be here to fill it. That is the hidden hand. This
is what we call the Ezer. Hava is the Ezer Kenegdo. She is what circles us and has always been here, but she's not dwelling in us. She is in the sacred earth and everything that is sacred and good and true. She is everything that surrounds us as what we would deem magic. Magic was taken out of us.
Right.
So we would come into the shape and the form. So we would build a capacity to hold magic again.
Right.
So we can be indwelled with Hava through life. We can gather all her pieces to then move into the death position again to say, I am now redefined death and I'm life living in the same space.
Totally comprehend. The only reason why I was trying to focus on this vacuum here is to explain why we have the hidden hand that is oppressing and putting force upon those that are meant to take it.
The reason that we have the hidden...
To grow up out of a suckling babe, because until we mature, and if we stay in children, then that hidden hand is going to continue to oppress us.
Yeah, okay. It was never meant to be hidden. It was meant to be resolved right away, yes. But so... it's only hidden because they choose to hide it. They have realized that this moves us into another dimension, and if they can suppress us, then they can control the people by always having this level of ego unrefined, that they've made a world more focused on matter than on spirituality.
Exactly.
And so we've associated everything of a dream connected to the resolve of what you only live once kind of a thing. And so everything in the world matters, but it doesn't. It's
Right.
about not mattering. To know everything in the world is about ingathering spirituality.
Right.
And
Well,
so,
because then what happens is that when we do that individually, then we are taking up both the right and the left. And as soon as we take up right and left, then we become sons and daughters, no longer suckling babes. We have matured into the manifested presence that is necessary to operate with both hands. That hidden hand is no longer hidden.
It's no longer hidden because it's revealed when you turn.
Right.
Only right return knows right representation. This is a language of law, that there is an order that has to be established. This has to be right. You're going to have to go through all this power. And then again, the compass, right? It's like the same language that I've already shared. It's like that begets that, that begets that, that begets that. This is all light on this side, but every time I turn into the light, I reveal a greater measure of shadow. And now in the fullness of my turning, I'm now resolved as completely illuminated. I'm transparent.
So in that turning, it's the word teshuvah.
Yes.
So that people understand that shuv in the center means to turn.
Yeah.
And then the tav in the front of it is completion of the turning that reveals the shadow. So what you're saying, every degree on this compass is a degree of turning, is teshuvah.
Yes,
teshuvah.
It's Yod He Vav He. It's in the vision that's giving me power to turn. I reflect as the expansion of my greater potential. Revealing begets revealing.
So for people that don't know the word teshuvah, it's what English translates as repent. Repentance.
Reciprocity, amended, whole. You're learning whole by pieces.
So in other words, repentance is dealing with your shadow. It's dealing with this.
Repentance,
so that you can turn.
Yes, repentance that's all it is. And as gentle as you can say it, it's just that you're going to have to learn to work with the fracture of the journey, because this is all new to us. Every experience is going to present a choice. We're going to have to choose to go into it for the purpose of extrapolating out a resolve, regardless.
Right. And so, having said that, that tav in front of shuv means exempt from judgment.
Right.
So every time we take a look at a shadow and we actually embrace it and we stop judging it, we've just turned.
So stop on that. We've turned.
I mean, that's huge, because that means you're no longer judging that shadow.
Right. And so that's all exempt from
repentance.
Again, that gets weaponized. When we say exempt from judgment, that is self-exploration.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
I know. I just want to drill down a little bit on that, because we always want to put it as an outside force that something's going to judge us. No, you're judging yourself. And when you're exempt, it means there's no more shadowing. You're turning. You are now shalem. You're at rest from your return, and you no longer have to be concerned because there is no more shadow in you.
So another way that we can say this is repentance, teshuvah, is an ongoing process.
It's an ongoing process until you
shadow after shadow after shadow, transmuting shadow after shadow.
Until you reach the point without shadow of doubt that you know you're resolved.
And this is where you trust yourself.
This is the language of being trusted, is through the accounts of the currency of exchange.
Right, the transmuting at the heart level.
By my investment, I deposit into the well of myself to know that I fill myself up in totality to become safe, shalom, as the trusted deed that is now a title.
Right, I can see that. I only just wanted to drill on that is because we're seeing why Christianity is no longer working, because they believe that repentance is a one-time deal.
No, never.
I know that.
Yeah,
I
know you.
That's
know
why
that.
it's imploding on itself, because this shadow is not done with it. It's like, if I go and do one thing, if I say that I'm a sinner, and I do the whole Jesus thing, this is why the seat of Caesar is imploding on itself. is because it doesn't deal with the fullness of the shadow.
Right. Well, this is again. So yeah. So let's
No longer sustainable.
So let's move that, because I'm hoping everyone's beyond this Christ and the cross of being like, again, please hear my heart in that. It's going like, it's showing you the template of how to arise in the measure of completion.
But this is a huge piece of it, because this allows us to totally let go.
Right. But all I'm saying is, like, when we put it on the shoulders of a redeemer outside of yourself, then you have no authority of a sovereign headship again. You've given it over to another to say he performed the duty, and I'm now living as a child under his sovereign reign. Going like, no, that's not what this is about. You're living as a child. This is about, when we do this correctly, we are now in the position of the Christ-minded as the returning back to that standard. I don't know what happened at the cross because I wasn't there. I know the story of it, but in the narrative of its potential as a frequency is saying that death arises you. This is life, this is death. Sovereignty is a beyond measure in its full capacity. And so it's connected to one on the cross, which is Aleph Tav. They're one in death, as one entity, as the Christ-minded, as Messiah, as Emanuel, how God, then he is pierced through to the Tav, because he's the Aleph. They live in the exact same space.
Right. And that's why the paleo pictograph of the Tav literally is a cross.
So
or two sticks crossed.
Right.
I mean,
he turned the nature from the 6 to the 9, right? He turned the whole, he was 666 by Vav, 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 by piercing of both hands and 1 foot or 2 feet. He was that measure.
Can you hand the little eraser cloth? And this is why what you were saying right here, I'm going to erase some of this stuff as we're going so we can open up the board.
Yeah, let's take this off here. Mel can
Yeah.
let's open this up.
So,
and we can take off this too so we're not confusing.
but we're going to probably come back to that, because this is that.
Right.
So when you shared with us a while ago,
right, this is arc potential.
so you have the Tav right here.
Right.
You have another Tav that is the shadow
Right.
of this one when the sunlight is hitting this way, but yet this sign with this is the Aleph.
Right. So let me draw it again. So
I'm just trying to dot connect from things that we've shared before.
So the Aleph and the Tav, what I just said, that would be the completion. The Aleph and the Tav live in the exact same space. And so by drawing it that way, we can see that is the Aleph and the Tav that is in the representation of completion as one measure. And again, when we look at this, we're looking.
And technically that's two Tavs.
It is.
One that's lit and one is the shadow. One is mother, one is father.
You just drew that, but let me just clarify why the Spirit showed me this, is that we see it looking at it 2D on a flat surface,
right?
But we are allowed to express it in a greater potential to show it as a 3D. And so I'm going to put an arc swing on this to show that there's a motion of rising, and it's going to be from this lower cross, and I'm simply going to make an arc and then an arrowhead to say it is pulled out of that one. So it's like grabbing the lower one and then pulling it back up. So this is on the stand now, and in its standing, it's showing the reflection of the shadow in the earth. It has now become the origin, showing the reflection of what it was that made it as a whole as rise.
So until it rises, it's still in shadow, which is just plain ego. It's like you haven't done the journey, the spiritual journey, to lift yourself up in order to rise. If
I just took it to a slower form, that is still the wilderness tabernacle.
Right.
It still is the laid down man, and it hasn't arisen.
Right.
So it's telegraphed. It says it many ways, and so yes, it's actually it hasn't fulfilled the role of arising,
which is why this comes in. So we had the Evel, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have that as a suckling babe. Then it moves into the Ein Lamed, which means to rise up, right? Mm-hmm. But that's really how you have to do it.
Yeah.
This is just saying, see and know the teachings, or see and know the staff of instruction.
Right.
But unless there's a revelation that comes from the teachings, you will never ascend.
You'll never ascend. So from this place, and again, going back to the headship, our head was upside down. So that's why we lost the head, because we came through the womb to crown ourselves. We came through crown. We came through royal. We came through the royal lineage of what brought us in. We already were birthed through the water, crowning ourselves into the experience. We're royalty here.
Yes, we are.
We're full-blown royalty here, going through the experience of expression.
Yes.
And so that's a great reminder, is that most of us have lost sight of our crown and we've given it to
that hidden hand.
Another.
Yeah.
That is in the representation of a savior.
Right.
And for some, that's government. For some, that many people, but they've relinquished their crown to say, I don't know who I am. I can't remember who I am. And you seem like you're doing a pretty good job at supplying my needs. I'll give my crown to you.
So we're under authority.
So we're oppressed.
Which is really oppression.
So now we give power to the warden to build the prison system that controls us by its dictate,
right,
by its constitution, by its resolve. And what I just showed was most of our government is somewhere in here, or even here, or for goodness sakes, even there.
All the way, right? But anyway.
So that's why we have a full-blown governmental system, but we were already brought in dominion and power. And we were simply learning we should have been able to learn the expression of a right ruling king knows the ways that rears it into its power. So it's gentle and kind and gracious in its becoming a completed being.
Right.
This is creating another inversion that's oppression, that is manipulative, that is seated in envy and greed and all the nasty dark stuff. So we have to learn to walk ourselves by exactly this, to rise into this standard, to know what this measure is. Now we're moving into this language of the right-hand pillar when it's rightly turned, is the word for yakin, right? The vision, it's actually hand, and it's back to your feeding, back to the child, right? By reaching out yod and grasping, I now am able to open-handedly grasp, close my hand to comprehend, and then ingest it, this vision, so I become what is to be progeny or representation of likenness with the power of the noon. And this language is established or will of intention. And so this is to stand, to be firm, to be fashioned in faith. And this is all where we get the language of trust. Same word for stand in faith is where we get the language of adornment and investment that starts to fortify our ability of trusting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we want to go from there?
Well, this lower man is the sixth man.
Okay.
This is the sixth man, and up here is the 9 man.
Okay.
So flipping the nature from the head being down below, as you literally picture that as a head, which is a yod.
Mm-hmm.
That's a yod, like this,
mm-hmm.
to now the 9, which is this way, which is another yod,
mm-hmm.
that you just flipped.
Right.
And so the center water line between the two is the Vav.
Right. So the journey to the 6 to the 9. So
which then is this.
Right. We can demonstrate this, and we'll bring this in so we can erase this. Let's just get rid of this real quick. We're not going to go in depth in here right now because this is a whole teaching in itself. But and then we can start erasing this. But I want to get back to more or less the expression of what Nu El is as a potential. This is all connected to this. And to the left hand side, we're trying to establish the right and the left hand as one response. But something has been removed from us. We came in with the measure. We came in. This is the ephod actually right here, and it's actually our heart. The breastplate. It's actually what we are. Is we're shielded with this, and we came in the measure. It's in Ezekiel that we only came in. The serpent came in with only 9 stones, but the 9 stones, there's still a distance here. We have to find the bridge for this 9. We have a responsibility. The establishment came in with the 9, And so we have the first and the second row. What's missing is the third row, and then we have the establishment of the fourth row. So there already is a measure here in totality, is a summation. And this journey of family and representation, these are all frequencies, they're all speaking values and attributes. Really, it's what it's saying. And so this language of establishment, we are given the 3 and the 6. What we're missing is the 9 to fulfill the 12. So we have the responsibility that we came in with the 6. We have to turn this nature by finding the missing 3. It's like a play. It's like a little puzzle, a little word play. So we already came in with the 6. We got to find the other 3 here. So we have to find this 3 again. We should find out what the innocence of this first row is again, because when we do, it will fulfill the 9. And then we can put the 9 back in place. And as soon as we do that, the 12 has already been there. The fourth row is there because it's the establishment that is beyond.
Right.
That's the 12. These are all strands of DNA. These are all cords that are wound in us as potentials of being, so we can fulfill the measure again. That's like a tether. There's like an umbilical cord that we can't see that's connected to that 12. But something has been gapped. There's like a missing piece in here that we have to fulfill to turn that 9 back into right position.
And hence why the 9 is the Tet.
And that is directly connected to the tribe of Dan.
Mm-hmm.
The choice that judges you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also connected to everything about us is a frequency of song or the ingathering of notes, because these are all notes of frequency of resolve, that at some point we start making better choices and better choices and better choices.
By healing our
by
shadow.
healing our shadow. And that's how choice resolves itself as fully rendered clear now. And then we're established through right standing. We are now confirmed by the right and the left hand, standing as progeny return. You've now established yourself as a measure.
So the way you can actually, I just got this picture because you've been talking about before about the ark, and remember the ark and dry dock?
Mm-hmm.
So we're upside down.
Yes. Yeah.
Here's the center keel.
Yeah.
Here's both sides of the ark.
Mm-hmm.
Under the water line, and we're upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And that when we go through the writing up process, then we flip that to this.
Right.
So the other thing that I saw.
But they work in hard. You don't lose it.
No, because both of them
right.
mirror each other.
They both mirror each other, and that's the walk of your resolve. You're walking through
the fire walk.
The fire walk of mother and father.
Yep, the one that's above and the one that's below.
Right, and so
and then the Vav in the middle. Yes. Okay. The other picture that I got when you're looking at it is like that completion of the night. It actually implodes the whole thing. Yeah, well, like it collapses the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that only one, as the 13, Ahava, can arise.
Right. Well, this is the process, right? And so connect that to the language that we've been saying, so people can connect to it. This is the validation that fulfills invalidation.
Mm-hmm. The door to the seat of life.
So these are the judge magistrates because they've adjudicated themselves to find this peace. They've rightly adjudicated. And Dan is only a frequency. It means you entered the door of your heart to know progeny's return, the way of progeny. That's what Dan means. It just means, but that can only be done by entering the sanctum of choice correctly. You're giving this.
Are you going to wrestle?
Right.
Or are you going to move past by connecting?
Because there's a crown on right choice on this, and it's on the left-hand side.
Right. So when we do this and we flip ourselves and we get to the 9 and we've hit the benchmark where we're at the bench as the judge magistrate, and we collapse all this down, we become the new man.
Right.
So this would be new Adam.
Right. So let's look at this word right here, because that word for, because this is now Emanuel. So now you've become the measure of the Christ head, because now your benchmark, you've gone through the court system, you became legal tender, You know the commerce.
So this is when you were under judgment.
You were under oppression or your own rule and reign, per se, until you came into your own like you broke free of the parental chain or the parents' rule, and you're like, huh, interesting. However that worked for you, whether it assisted you or not, however you have to reorienteer yourself for right reign and return, right? This is still a law of return to turn this correctly. And so now you've now gone through the court system correctly. The 3 and the 6 is more like mothers weaning and ripening is now within your belly. Your courtroom is now, here's your courtroom, right? And now you're speaking from this language of really this transition place of more the bar. The bar is like this distance from between the outer courts and the inner courts is the authority of the bar is the separation from your heart that translates as your mouth.
Holy crap.
That's the neck.
No, I just, oh, this is so amazing. When we're upside down, the head is the outer court.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, you're in your mind.
That's what I'm saying. The left-hand power.
But I'm looking at it at the Wilderness Tabernacle. So the outside court where the laver is and where the altar, the brazen altar is all the mind.
Yes.
Then when you get into that inner court, you enter into the holy place.
Right.
Is when you're dealing with the heart chamber.
Reverence of awareness of who you are and the potentiality of who you are.
Through that transmutable sign.
Right.
Right here.
Right.
Right. Then when you get to the Holy of Holies, that's the bar.
You're now speaking as it.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the bar is actually the curtain that separates. Right. So it's the curtain that separates between the holy place and the Holy of Holies, because once you get into the Holy of Holies, you are the ark of testimony.
It's actually an oxymoron. When you're brought into the world, the most vulnerable place of a child is the neck.
Oh, big time, yeah.
Like you have to hold the head. Like I've had 2 kids, and young parents that would know that you hold the head. They have no support in their neck. They have no neck, right? That's why I purposely drew it this way.
Sure.
There's a distance.
Bowing the head.
So we bow the head in reverence because you can't hold it up on your own right now. You have to learn to strengthen it. But there is a process. But these that they call themselves adults from this position and have fortified their neck are called the stiff-necked.
That's really good.
Because they haven't turned, but yet they hold it. They can only go like, they're like, yeah, but you can feel it on them. Like you have no authority to say this.
So in other words, they've never changed their mind.
They've
never changed and turned their mind to the mind of Christ.
You'll know them because again, these stiff-necked ones
they're not humble.
They're not humble.
They're full of ego.
These ones are speaking from the place of knowing what it is to have the head removed, and to have the head replaced is solely dependent on your surrendering to its power.
Right.
It's not about wielding it. It's about really the neutrality of knowing that you speak in the innocent. So the neck is now the gateway to the expansive Father. That's where the judge speaks.
Because that's the neck is what turns the head.
Yeah. But it's also in the body form while we're in earth. It's what gives the authority. It's the transmutive nature that takes from the heart and takes the frequency into the expanse of rostrum, the beat.
Right. Because this is where the authority is in the throat chakra.
So the rostrum,
the
there's no greater rostrum because the rostrum, the pulpit is the exact same as the bench.
Right.
All it is the broadcasting stations. Thought's beak is the rostrum. The pulpit,
which that is directly connected to the heron.
It's directly connected to Nu, right? But so yes, the Nun Vav is exactly of the expansive that you've reached the place of Phoenix. The blue heron, the Bennu bird in ancient Egypt, the dragon of Revelation, the Christ-minded of Revelation. It's just a process of revealing.
So that new is this.
That new. So let's expand on this new a little bit. We'll probably have to shift over here now. But these are a people. These people, these are connected to this. This is Emmanuel, means God with you. So by definition, let's take it in the expansive language, is talking about moving towards a general mass a union, a conjunction, a bond, a people, a corporation or cooperation, corporation. So now there's a collective as an assembly. God, some assembly required, is us putting the pieces back together to know that it's not necessarily you and I and all our friends meeting as an assembly. It's about us assembling ourselves as the people. When I get myself put back together and you do as well, and we meet, we are now God in the earth, right? We're now in union and agreement with the fulfillment of why we should have been here as family, because now we're in likeness.
So then, having said that, because if you go through the whole thing of the turn, you become aliyah. Aliyah literally means, it's a phrase that they use that talks about returning back to the land. Mm-hmm. But really, it's not about the dispersion of returning to the land of Israel.
No.
It's returning to that of the nature of Israel, of those who prevailed as God.
Aliyah is
because that's the ascended that are God. Yod-He is the shortened form of the tetragrammaton.
Yes. Aliyah as a frequency in the lesser is returning to the land to fulfill it, to till the land. Aliyah is a frequency of earth. It's the signature. And you said nature. And so it's a frequency, sig, nature.
Yeah.
And so it's a frequency of return that
sign
says,
of nature.
That means Azrael as one is back in the earth again, and they are the title deed to the sacred earth. They inherit the whole earth as the land.
That's why humanity as Adam, sorry, that is a completed, as Adam, when they go through their shadow, because then it's the chaos, right? Because we have this form,
mm-hmm.
They go through their shadow,
mm-hmm.
And when they do it completely, they are revealed as the earth.
Yes.
Ha-Adamah.
They're revealed as the earth. This is the sacred earth returned back into the measure. What we said, that now the spirit is indwelling in you again.
Because just for people that don't know, Adamah is another word for earth.
Right. It's also in your blood. Like you're
one blood.
One blood. So this is
blood.
This has always been in our blood. We just have to purify the blood because the bloodline is purified.
Right.
But not in what we think it would be. It's
like in the natural, it's a spiritual progression that happens.
That's
why this is DNA related.
It's a language of purging, but it's got nothing to do. It's got everything to do with the shadow work that purges you. It has nothing to do with an outside. It's all about the uniqueness of the individual in their own purging, so innocence and purity may arise. Morals and ethics of right standing.
So in the process, just so that we can kind of land the plane on this and then switch gears, which I'm going to have to take a break because we've already been talking for a long time and I'm worn out. This right here, when we flip the nature and we're talking about becoming God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Emanuel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Ayil,
the mighty,
is a word for mighty,
mm-hmm.
which is connecting again to Boaz.
Boaz.
But this is also the same word for pilaster.
Right. Yeah.
Pilasters.
Yeah.
So, but it's a single, it's not plural. So what you end up doing is the marriage of the right pillar and the left pillar that become one in the center, which is called the central pillar.
Right.
Which is when you become God because you found the power in the center within the heart.
Yeah. So, but
that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It is a big deal, but we need to show people that there's a way to do this correctly. You can't just assume this, that yes, the whole process is knowing.
I'm just saying this is the intention.
That's the intention. We have to know how to weave. This is everything about Ibri is the language, even in its own definition, Ibri, it means the language of weaving. This is the master of weaving. So yes, that has to be woven. So that is the result, absolutely. But so we will.
So I just wanted to say that because it's Emanuel, and Aiel is pilasters, and we started talking about the pilasters of Yakin and Boaz at the beginning, so I thought this was a great place
Yeah.
to kind of land the
Yeah,
plane.
absolutely.
That becoming a Manu, we already talked about the new tribe of Dan, 13th, collapse this, Ahava is part of becoming the fullness of Emanuel.
Yeah, new is a big deal. New is a really big deal. That it's just a little tiny word, nun vav, but it actually it is a very, very powerful being, because you're taking. It's actually called an expansion. It's the new dwelling. So people are now the new dwelling, and they have to have that there as progeny now in the expanse as the vav connecting to God, and it's talking about. Where everything is joined to nothing. That's what new means in the expanse. So it fulfills it, that validation to invalidation, where something has connected to nothing, but nothing isn't nothing. Nothing is the everything of God. And so we can break down that new. This is why I had Memnu. Because what is this memnu? Because you're now the watermark. You're now like a dollar bill is watermarked. Mm-hmm. A currency of exchange. The original as a not the counterfeit is watermarked, so it can't be bastardized or just manipulated. And so this is part of the watermarking, that these will return and they will be marked as water.
How interesting is it? But it's a hidden mark.
It's a hidden mark, right?
It has to turn in the right light to be seen.
It almost has an iridescent quality to it. When it turns, it has a flicker in its turning.
Right.
It has a sheen as a turning sword.
Right.
So that's exactly what's happening with the frequency of Oman and El, and we can do it. If you want to take a break, we can go, because then that was mostly just a setup, because Emmanuel, now we have to connect what this is with Messiah, and Mashiach, because they're exactly the same word, to connect it to these are the anointed. So the head can be placed back on. It's the fulfillment of the 9 back in the earth. The magistrate.
And the only way that can happen is with immaculate.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I'm saying as a frequency of word that I can connect Omnu to right to Mashika and right to Messiah, to state that they're all saying Amanu.